Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Elevating Your Life. And oh my gosh, today we are going to chat with just an amazing woman from the beautiful country of New Zealand, somewhere I am just so thrilled to share that I've been. I loved it. We have with us today Suzanne Court. She is a PhD, a qualified equine assist therapist and mental health practitioner with over 30 years of horse experience and 10 years of experience working professionally with horses in the mental healing and spiritual space. She teaches group and individual courses and gives lectures on equine assisted therapy. She comes from a musical and academic background, having been a performing classical guitarist and a professor of music. She has published widely in historical musicology, but her book, Soul Connections with Horses, is her first about horses. And she shares equine therapy work with 7 beautiful horses and her partner on their small farm in New Zealand. Suzanne, I'm so grateful to have you on the show.
Well, it's wonderful to be here, Paula. Thank you so much for asking me.
Oh, and your book is fantastic. First off, though, is there a little more of your background you'd like to share? I'd love to hear a little bit about your music background.
Sure. I mean, my two passions in life have always been horses and music and art as well. Um, that's my latest little project. But yeah, so I was always a musician. I played the violin and the piano, and then when I was in my late teens, I discovered classical guitar. And eventually I did a degree in music and then went to London to study classical guitar, and I worked as a guitarist for 10 years or so. Then I decided to go back to university because I was passionate about an academic aspect of music, and did a PhD. It wasn't the plan, but I went back to university and got offered a scholarship. And who wouldn't do something when you paid to do it, just to follow your dream for 5 years, 4 years, or whatever. And that took me to Rome as well, or to Italy, where I had a scholarship there at Rome University for a year. And I traveled all around Italy researching um, music of the 16th century. So that took me to lots of monasteries and libraries, including the Vatican Library of all places. In fact, that was the very first library I went to. And so I had the most extraordinary experience doing that work. And then after that, I was a lecturer and a professor for the next 20 or so years after that, or 30. It was 30 if you take into account the PhD time as well. And then during all that time, of course, my passion with horses was also alive and well. And I never had a horse as a child because it just wasn't applicable. It wasn't possible with my family. But as soon as I was able to and earning my own money, I got my own horse and hired paddocks, and away I went. Um, and so those two passions went concurrently until about 15 years ago, when I retrained as a counselor and an equine assisted therapist. I did that in Australia. I had a job in Australia, and I did that retraining there at the end of that job. And so for the last 12, 13 years now, we've been situated back in New Zealand in a place called the Waikato, which is very green and lush, very wet in the winter, very hot in the summer. And we have 7 horses. And my partner and I, we have a business offering therapy in the presence of horses.
Oh, how was it that you discovered uh, how how wonderfully horses can help with personal healing and spiritual growth? How was it you discovered that?
Well, I discovered it for myself. Um, when was it? About 20 years ago or so, I got cancer. And this is a wake-up call for a lot of people when you have a major health crisis. And I was in an incredible, after all the treatment that you get given that keeps you alive, which you can be very grateful for. What I wasn't grateful for was the pain that I experienced throughout my whole body after that treatment. And the pain just would not go away other than taking lots of pharmaceuticals. And of course that does terrible things to you psychologically if you're on that for a long time. So a friend of mine said, look, I have this friend who's a healer. And at that stage, I was an academic. I wasn't into that kind of thing. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, I'll waste $100 or whatever it is going to this healer just to amuse my friend, to keep her happy. So I went off to a Reiki healer, and unbelievably, quite a few things happened during, I think it was only 2 or 3 sessions, but quite a lot happened. One was that an animal came to me in, visually, a lion. The other was that I had a mental connection with her mother. I didn't even know her mother, but I sensed that her mother was in the other room and that she was very unhappy. And the other thing is that my pain just disappeared within 2 or 3 weeks, all gone completely. And I thought, wow, what is this thing?
It's one.
And
Oh, yeah.
and as I was talking to her about these things, she said, well, look, you're obviously a very sensitive person. You could do this work yourself. And as I started to do the work, I got the most amazing connection with my horses. I mean, not only was it good working with people, but I started to not exactly read their minds, because they have different minds to us, are non-verbal, so they have a different way of experiencing the world. But I could put myself in their place. I could feel at times what it was like to be a horse. And so that that connection kept me going. And of course, being with horses helped me enormously in my own healing, because they're great self-healers. I mean, they can't go off to the pharmacist to get to get medicines when they need it, pardon me. They have an amazing way of healing themselves. They do so if they've got the right sort of plants around. They self-heal by choosing plants to eat, but they also have an incredible mental capacity to heal. And you see it with a lot of animals. When they're injured, if they are going to heal at all, they heal very quickly. And that's because they have the right mental capacity for it.
Yes, yes. And in
They
your
don't
book,
do, they don't do what we do,
yes,
which is to add a story to it. We upset our natural healing by having a story of, oh, why is this happening to me? Oh, I'm in such a terrible state, and oh, what are people going to think? And they don't have that prefrontal cortex, which is very useful to us in so many ways, but we use it against ourselves too when we make up stories that are not conducive to healing and
yes,
well-being.
yes. And you've mentioned in your book that humans and horse brains have many similarities, many similarities.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as beings, we're very similar. I've also trained as an equine massage therapist, and it's a technique called equine touch that comes out of Europe. Um, and as I did that, I had to learn, of course, all the anatomy and physiology of the horses. And oh my goodness, it is so similar. Horses are so similar to us. Basically, if we were walking on 4 legs still, we would have the same anatomy. And even the names of the bones are the same. Well, obviously, some human made up the names of the
Wow.
bones, but the way we're put together is very, very similar. There are a couple of differences. One is that the horse actually stands on anatomically, they stand on the tip of their finger, so that their hoof is the equivalent of our fingertip, and the hoof wall is the equivalent of our fingernail. That's one difference. The other difference is that their front legs are not attached to their body by bone, like our arms are attached to our shoulders. We've got joints there. They don't have a joint that attaches. They attach through muscle and ligament, and that enables them to move much faster and much more athletically than we do. And in terms of the brain, exactly the same, put together in the same way. Just putting it in very simple terms, there are three areas of the brain. There's the rare part of the brain where some people call this the lizard brain, where we just learn all our movement and all our natural bodily functions. The middle part of the brain is often called the mammalian brain. That's where all our emotions work from there and other things, but that's part of the job. And then we have the prefrontal, the cortex, the thing that wraps around the whole brain, and the prefrontal cortex, which is where we do our mathematics and figuring out how much money we've got for our shopping.
Yeah.
So horses don't need that. Obviously, they don't use their brain for those kinds of functions. So that is the main difference. Everything else, the way they react to the world is the same way we would react to the world. We see something frightening, we jump, or we freeze in one place and try to figure out what's going on. They have joy and fear and anger and pleasure and being investigative, all the same emotions that we have. The big difference is that with our prefrontal cortex, we examine our experience. And that is what brings us to philosophy and psychology and all these understandings, but it also brings us a lot of pain. And it's what, and I'm sure you're familiar with this term in Buddhism, what Buddha called the second arrow. So something happens to us, which causes us pain. The second arrow is what causes us misery, because with the second arrow is the way we think about something. So something unfortunate happens to us, and then we spend the next day, week, month, years, or the rest of our lives thinking, oh, poor me, this terrible thing that happened to me, oh, why? So that's the big difference between us and horses. They don't do that, examining why something happens. They just accept what happens.
Mhm.
They might not like it, but they accept it.
Yeah, beautiful wisdom for us. Is it possible to meditate with a horse?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of the work I do is meditation. So the horse becomes a point of focus. So the thing about meditation, let's ask a question of what it is. It's not such a mysterious thing, really. It is simply putting our attention on something outside of ourselves or even inside of ourselves, like our breathing, putting our attention on one thing, so that we can notice what else is going on. So if we're putting our attention on our breathing, that's when we notice our monkey brain going, oh, blah, 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 what am I going to do after this? And what am I going to cook for dinner? And, oh, what somebody said to me yesterday. And we notice all the flotsam and jetsam going on in our brains. And it's not for us to notice and then feel bad about that, but simply to notice so that, we can't change anything unless we notice, unless we know what's going on, right? So once we know what's going on in our minds, then we've got some options. Then we've got the option of choosing to focus on something else. So meditation is an exercise in choosing to focus on one thing. So the horse becomes the point of focus, and it enables us to trace our thoughts and ignore our, not go off on the story. So something happens in our thinking. We think about what we're going to cook for dinner tonight. We can then say to ourselves, oh, I'll think about that later, rather than going off on the whole story and working our way through the recipe or whatever it is. Much worse, of course, if it's something that involves anger, irritation, and that kind of thing. So the point of focus, what can we focus on? Well, we've got the wonderful, the sense of touch of a horse, that wonderful feeling of rubbing your hands over this lovely soft fur. We can focus on that. I can ask a client to focus on that. Then we can focus on the smell of the horse. People who love horses love the smell of the horse, that lovely, lovely nutty smell. So we've got touch, we've got smell, we've got vision, so we can look at what the horse looks like, and I can ask the client to describe what they're looking at, or simply to stand there and just to notice. And we notice the color. And we notice when we look at color, it's not just, let's say, brown. If you look at a brown horse closely, you see white and orange and yellow and brown and black. That brown is a mixture of lots of different colored hairs. So in putting your focus on something other than yourself, that's when you realize, first of all, that you can do that. And secondly, that you start to notice things coming in that are getting in the way. You can also use traditional techniques such as breath and mantra. One of my favorite things is I've got a lot of trees on my property, and they're old trees, like hundreds of years old. And so I can sit on the root of one of these trees and allow the horses to mill around, to be in that area. And I'll sit there myself, and I do this with clients as well, but I love doing it myself, is to sit there, shut my eyes and meditate for half an hour. And as I shut my eyes, I start to become aware of, I can hear very gentle hoof movements, you know, I can feel their presence, and I might be able to smell the horse, and every now and then I'll hear, you know, little noises that they make with their mouths. And I don't need to open my eyes because I can sense them. I know they're there with all my other senses, and I trust them. I know they're not going to do anything. And when I do finally open my eyes at the end of the session, they are usually 7 horses standing around me like in a semicircle facing me. And one horse might even have their head right over hanging over the top of my head. And that is so delicious. It is such an honor and a privilege, because what that means is that they're picking up on my state of being. They know that I'm meditating, that I'm in the same state that they are in all the time, because they are meditating all the time. They don't get carried away with the stories about who they are and who other people are. They're in that state of meditation. They're in that state of presence in the moment. They're always in the moment.
Yes.
Because they have to be, you know, as although they're domesticated, obviously, and have been for centuries, they still have the wild in them, you know, their lizard brain, the back part of their brain still has all the instincts of being a horse. And they know that they have to be aware of everything that's going on around them all the time for their own safety. And as you know, they're fabulous runners. That's why they, you know, we've used them for things like races. And if you've ever been a rider, anyone who's ridden for many years will know the experience of sitting on a horse, quietly walking along, going on a nice little trek, and then suddenly something happens and boom, your horse is bolted. So it goes from either slow walk or even standing completely still to full gallop in a second. And, you know, it's so quick, you don't even know it's happening when you're on the horse. It's pretty frightening, but survivable mostly. And so they are in that state all the time where they've got readiness for movement, because it's movement that has kept them alive, unlike us. You know, we can do a little bit of jumping out of the way, but it's nothing like the athletic ability that they have. So they are constantly aware of their environment. They know everything that's going on. And you can see it with them. You can see their ears moving. Their ears move independently. So they're constantly looking 360 degrees with their ears, hearing everything. They, their eyes as well. They've got literally 360-degree vision, except for a tiny little bit at the back of their bottoms. But then all they need to do is their butts is turn their head slightly and they can see. So they're constantly aware, whereas we, as humans, are completely different in this way. We are built with our eyes in the front of our head and our focus straight ahead. And so that's because we've had millions of years of being hunter-gatherers. or hundreds of thousands of years anyway, being hunter-gatherers. So we need to be able to focus on something ahead of us, to ignore everything else that's going on, and be able to hunt the gazelle or whatever it is we're chasing for our evening meal. So that's our advantage, but it's also these days our disadvantage, because we've forgotten how to have the wider vision, which means that we are so focused on moi. I'm so focused on me and what I want to do today. And when we're talking, it's all about what I want to say more than it is listening. So being with horses and doing this kind of meditation work trains us to listen more. To listen, I'm using that in the wider sense. By listening, I mean, same as when I say looking, it means just to open yourself up to what's going on, and to be aware of what's going on without creating a story about it. So when we focus straight ahead, we've got the story about what we're going to do, where we're heading, and what we're going to get, what we're going to achieve, all these things. With horses, I'm keeping myself safe to make sure, because they're herd animals, they're prey animals, they're keeping themselves safe from the tigers and lions that might be hiding in the long grass. Now, we used to be caring about that as well. As hunter-gatherers, not only would we look for the gazelle that we're hunting, we also had to keep ourselves safe from the lions and the tigers. So we also had to be aware of our peripheral vision. But we've lost that capacity. I mean, the capacity is still there, but we've lost the habit, because we don't have to care about that anymore. And so we can just focus on ourselves and where we're going. And that has got us into a lot of trouble psychologically as well. I mean, it gets us all into trouble on a daily basis, not taking a wider view. What's the wider view here? What do you think this experience is like for somebody else instead of only me? So the kind of work we can do with the horse is, I will ask a client, what is the horse experiencing right now? And they'll, first of all, they'll say, oh, I don't know. And I'll say, well, what do you think they're smelling? And it'll be the same as what we're smelling. What do you think they're hearing? Oh, they can hear the birds in the trees. What do you think they're seeing? Oh, they're seeing the birds jumping around over there. They can see a moth there and a butterfly, and they can see another horse, So we explain, get them to experience their own world in a wider way. And then I might ask them to perhaps take the horse for a walk and try to experience life from the point of view of the horse. What is the horse experiencing? We've just been through that exercise. Now take the horse for a walk and see if you can experience that horse from the horse's point of view. And it seems like such a really simple thing to ask someone to do. And when I first started doing it, I thought, this is daft. I mean, fancy asking someone to do that. But invariably, they will come back and say, oh my goodness, that was amazing. Like, I had one client that came back, because of the area that I work with horses is surrounded by these trees. And she came back and said, wow, I had no idea that all these trees were here. And they're massive, they're huge, and it creates a big canopy around it. And I had no idea that I could lift my head up and experience what was happening above, rather than just looking at the bit of grass in front of me. I could experience the whole world around me. And so once somebody has experienced that with a horse, they can then choose to do that. And this is the aim, to do these exercises with horses, and then to say, well, look, this week, or, between now and when you come back, how about you remind yourself 3 or 4 times a day to experience the world in wide vision, and to ask yourself what you can hear, what you can smell, what you can feel. Can you feel the wind or the breath of the air on your skin? Can you feel the breath going through your nose? Are you aware of your breathing? And bring it to your own body as well, the somatic awareness. Are you aware of what you feel like in your gut? Or have you got a knot in your stomach? And if you do have a knot in your stomach, that means something. That means that your body is telling you that there's something not quite right. There's something you're worrying about. Then put your attention on your thoughts. What are you worrying about? And then, once you've got your attention on your thoughts, then there are other techniques to kind of, to release certain thoughts that are not in any way conducive to being healthy.
Oh, I love it. I love it, Sue. And something in your book that I just loved was all animals teach us a spiritual level as does nature. Sitting near a river, watching the water flow, teaches us patience and perseverance. Dogs teach us about loyalty, affection, and how to have fun. I mean, there's so many great things in your book. We just have a few minutes left in the show. What last words do you want to share, Sue? And tell us if you have a website or any information you want to share, and you know where they can get Soul Connection with Horses.
Sure. Okay, Soul Connection with Horses should be available through bookshops throughout the US and Europe, but it's also available on Amazon, of course. I think one thing I want to leave people is those two words in the title, soul connection. First of all, we all are souls. We don't have souls, we are souls. And you know, you might ask yourself, what is spirituality? What is a soul? It's not it's not a thing, it's not an object, but it's a subject. It's not an arrival, but it's a process. It's something that we get to know throughout our lives. It's not a separate entity, but it's connectedness. So souls on their own are nothing. I mean, there's no such thing. We are connected to everybody else's soul, and that means to all animals, to the whole universe. We might even think of the whole universe as being a soul. And so it's the depth of being within us that is constant, and everybody has that. What we do have is the choice to be connected to that depth of being or not. And we can go for many, many years ignoring that. I did. I went for about 20 years ignoring that. And then gradually it went, knock, 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 come on, take notice of me. And life is so, so much more meaningful and pleasant if we recognize that depth of being. And it's something we all have within us. It's a sense of, it's a longing for oneness. And when we meet a horse, an animal like that, we know that they have that sense of oneness. And I think that's one of the major attractions that we have to horses and animals in general, is I want to experience that oneness. That's that sense of longing. I used to look in a horse's eyes when I got my very first horse. I would look in his eyes, his big, beautiful brown eyes, and ask myself, who are you? Who is in there? And there is no answer to that, of course. It's a very deep question. And the answer, of course, came to me eventually, that there is no answer. But the question is worth asking, because if we ask, who am I? Who are you? Whether we're talking about another human or an animal, that gives us the answer. It's a sense of beingness that we share.
That is so awesome. Oh, Sue, thank you so much. And yeah, I know when I was younger, my horse, she was my best friend, and I swear our hearts were connected. It just,
Yeah.
thank you for all this great information and joining us today. I am so grateful. Everyone out there, love, hugs, and blessings. Thank you for joining us today. Sue, love, hugs, and blessings. You are awesome.
Thank you so much. And to you, the same. Thank you.